Not bad, not bad. We have our basic setup in place. We have our first input. We have the button that submits the form. So now we just need to add a few more inputs, correct? One for password and then one for email. But if we take a look at our application, you can see that there's going to be a bunch of components that we will set up with those inputs. So notice for the profile, we'll use the inputs. For the jobs, we'll use that. And kind of would make sense if we would set this one up as a separate component, because that way we won't have to copy and paste. So we can set this up as a component, and then pretty much anywhere where we want to render this, we just pass in the props. So here's what I want you to do. Go to a components folder and then create FormRow.js and set up all the imports and exports. And what I mean by that is import it in the index.js, export it from the object, and then import it in register. So those 3 steps. And once you do that, go to a FormRow and pretty much take whatever we have right now for input and just set it up using the props. We'll notice the FormRow component will be looking for type, name, value, handle, change, and label text. And this one I'll talk about once I set it up in a second. And then in here, you basically want to take the div, the label, the input, and just assign them to the props. And once you do that, then in the register, you can add 2 more, one for email and password. Just keep in mind that for email and password, types are different, name will be different, and also the value in initial state will be different. The handle change will be exactly the same, but not the first 3. And once you're ready to go, resume the video and watch how I do it. So first, we need to navigate where? To the components, correct? So let's get ourselves there. And then let's just say FormRow.js. And then I simply want to take what I have in the register. So I'm going to set it up right away, and then I'll deal with imports and exports. That's really up to you, how you want to do it. So I'm just going to take this. So cut it out here. And then back in a FormRow. Well, first I want to create the component, correct? So let's just go with our snippet. And then as far as the return, well, let's copy and paste. And like I said, this component will be looking for the props, because every time I'll want an input, well, I'll just pass in what kind of input. And what are the things that we're looking for? Well, we want to get the type, we want to get the name, we want to get the value, we want to get the handle change, and we also want to get a label text. Now, why we're getting a label text? Well, because there's going to be some instances where the variable in the state will have a camel case name, but then as far as the label, I want to showcase a proper name. And the way we'll set it up, I'll say if the label text prop is passed in, then use that value. If not, then just use a regular name. So what you need to understand is that there's going to be some instances where the state value is not going to match exactly like we have right now, where we have name. Imagine if you were to have their first name, but I still want to showcase the name. And that's where the label text comes into play. And this will probably make sense way more the first time we'll have to use it. So for now, just focus on these ones. And then again, this one will be only used if it's actually passed in. If not, we'll still use the name. And now let's assign these values to our props. So instead of hard coding the name, I'll say whatever is the name prop. Now, class stays the same. And in here, text, yep, this is where we'll call the label text if it's passed in. If not, then we'll just go with name. Then as far as the type, well, the moment we have already a prop, correct? So let's set up here a type. And then as far as the value, well, we'll pass it in. So we simply want to switch this around where we're not looking for the values anymore. We're looking for the value prop. And then name, well, that will be equal to a name. And then handle change stays exactly the same, because now it's going to be a prop, and then we'll just pass it in from the parent container. So I set this on up. I have the default export. So now I simply want to go to my index. And this is the case where we can use the nice auto import. And basically my preference is something like this, where I go with form and then row. I import it here, and now I just want to place it in this object. So I move it down, then I need to add a comma just to have a proper syntax. Now it might spit back some things here, and we also need to save the register. And then once I'm back in the register, not only I want to get the logo, but I'm also looking for that form row. So let's say here, form row. And then once we import, now I can scroll down, and now what do we want to do? We want to pass in those props, correct? And not only we want to pass in the props for the name input, well, we also want to do the same thing for the email and the password. So let's go here with form row. And as far as the name, it's going to be like this. We're going to go with type, and type will be text. Then name will be equal to name. And then also the value will be equal to values and name. And then lastly, handle change will be equal to a handle change. So essentially, now we just set up everything in the component instead of hard coding. So this value will still be the same. And also, once we click on it, we'll still trigger the handle change. But now I can reuse it all throughout my project. So now let's take this, including the comment. I think it's going to be easier that way. Let's copy and paste. And just be careful when you're setting up these values, because it's very easy to make some kind of mistake. So first of all, this is not going to be a name input. We're going to go with email. Then as far as the type, well, it's not a text anymore. It's going to be an email. Then when it comes to a name of the input, that's going to be email as well. And as far as the value, well, now we're looking in the state and we go with email. And that's the cool thing. If you set it up here as an object, I can basically use the same function. So the handle change will access both the name of the input as well as the value. And then I'll just access the proper thing here in my initial state. So that's why I don't have to change anything about this function. It's assigned to a prop, and then it's triggered in the form row. And the same goes for password. So I'm going to go here with password. And then as far as the type, yep, it's going to be a password type. So let's set up here password. Now name, yep, same password. And then value, we're looking in the values, and we're looking for the password. And like I just mentioned, handle change stays exactly the same. So once I have all of them in place, again, let's navigate to the big screen, and let's just quickly click on one of them just so we can see. Notice now I'm getting the name, email, and the value that actually matches my email in the state. And with this in place, now we can do the same thing with alert.